Let's call the Planning Commission meeting to order for March 3rd, 2020. Please stand for the pledge. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Bentley, can you call the roll, please?
Yes, I can. Nunzio?
Here.
Charlie Oliver? Not here.
Charlie's
and
out of town,
I'm
so
told
he's
that,
gonna be absent.
Yep. And that's excused.
Yep.
Mr. Sciutto?
Here.
Mr. Hardy?
Here.
I'm here, Mr. Bentley, and Mr. Tuckfield?
Present.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to exclude Member Oliver from any and all roll call votes if we have any tonight.
Support.
Motion made by Mr. Sciutto, supported by Mr. Provenzano. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item number 4, approval of the minutes. There was some question about the minutes, and they have been revised. It is, I think, mostly clerical kinds of things that were pointed out. So you have a new set of minutes in front of you. Do I have a motion to approve?
If all the corrections have been made, then I would ask that we accept the minutes as amended.
Support.
Motion made by Mr. Provenzano, supported by Mr. Sciutto. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Approval of tonight's agenda. We have with tonight's agenda, let me find it here, right here in front of me. We have a couple of items for old business. And one of them is an extension of time, and the other one is the conditional rezoning that we talked about and postponed until tonight. Even the agenda has been changed just ever so slightly and under old business. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Sciutto, supported by Mr. Provenzano. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. All right, under new business, permanent ground sign, Triumph Gear, permanent parcel, 08183000021, located on the north side of 23 Mile Road, east of Hayes, Section 18, Curb Appeal Concepts petitioner. And you're already there. Can you state your name for the record, please? And
Yes.
your address?
Timothy Muller. I'm the owner of Curb Appeal Concepts. My address is 4040 Montgomery Drive, Shelby Township.
Okay. And we'll start with our planner, Mr. Skirdo.
Yes, Triumph here approached the city and applied for a sign. It's not a total sign. What it is an addition to the existing ground sign. They're adding an electronic message board to the top of it, and they're adding some address numbers. We've gone through the ordinance and looked at 8 or 9 items dealing with setbacks, dealing with height, dealing with area, and we found all to be in compliance with the ordinance.
Okay. Petitioner, do you have anything to add?
Nope, that sums it up.
Okay. Questions from the board?
Mr. Chairman, I just had a technical one for Mr. Skirdo. On this particular item, if we were to vote affirmatively, would this be a recommendation? Would it be approval? How would we state this?
This would be an approval from the Planning Commission.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Take it to the public. Anybody in the public have anything to say? Sure, sir. You are our public tonight. Okay. Do I have a motion?
I have one question.
Okay.
Just a matter of intent. You have on the south side of that existing sign, you have a small sign that is there for what appears to be employment opportunity. Is that something that will remain in that location, or is that part of, or what you plan on including as part of that additional sign?
I've informed my client that obviously, when we put a new LED sign in, any additional signage on the property would have to go away. So they're aware of that moving forward. There will be no more flags or hiring signs that have to go on the new digital display.
Understand. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else with questions? Anyone?
Mr. Chairman, if there's no further questions, I would make a motion to approve the ground sign for Triumph Gear, permit parcel 0818300021, pursuant to the recommendations from the planning consultant and other appropriate departments, and meeting all required specifications.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Tuckfield to approve, seconded by Mr. Provenzano. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. Old business.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Old business, discussion regarding the proposed tax amended zoning ordinance for conditional rezoning that we tabled on February 18th, 2020. Mr. Skirdo.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Hardy. Yes, in front of you, we have a memo we handed out in February. It has to deal with kind of description of what conditional rezoning is and a suggested language to be put in your ordinance. In a nutshell, commercial conditional rezoning was allowed by state legislature as part of Public Act 110 of 2006. It was put in place to help sites, especially areas that are redeveloping and things that had existing uses that didn't quite fit the larger zoning pattern. It was put in recognizing that some uses and some land could be developed that didn't quite neatly fit into a zoning pattern, but taking certain design measures, they could fit and be a productive part of that area.
Okay.
What we have in front of you is actually a zoning ordinance that's used by quite a few communities. It has been brought in front of the city or the township attorney. He has, in fact, gave us his recommendations. We've included these in this ordinance. The ordinance, what it does, it doesn't specify, like you're typically used to, setbacks, heights. It's no dimensions in there. Simply what it does is part of the enabling legislation. It enables a township to use this law as a tool to allow this type of development that doesn't, like I said, doesn't quite neatly fit into a zoning pattern. So it allows that to occur. In it, you'll see items of how to do a process, how to go through, who does the recommendations, who reviews it, township board votes, as well as amendments to it. If this commission decides, one way or another, recommending for or against it, the board's looking for a recommendation from the planning commission. If it decides to go forward, the next step, I'm going to double check with the attorney, would be for this commission to hold a public hearing on the ordinance, get it in front of you, then formally put your recommendation in place. And then we will send it to the township board. They, at that point, could enact another public hearing, or they could take it straight to a vote. So tonight we're here for a discussion. Again, last time we just passed it out to let everybody get familiar with the language. And tonight we're here to discuss, any items. Is there anything in the proposed language that you want changed? We can make those changes and submit it to the attorney to look at. And then we would also, if you're so inclined, would we also ask you to set the public hearing date for us to move.
Okay. The suggested ordinance is on page 2, I believe, of the conditional rezoning discussion of zoning techniques, so the commissioners know. And it runs from page 2 all the way to the very end of that pamphlet. Okay, any questions from the planning commissioners?
Yeah, I have one question to Dave. If we set up a public hearing,
Yes.
how much in advance would you need to know? Could it be done in April? Could it be done
The
in
public
May? Or
hearing requires 15 days' notice, but in time we have to get it earlier and get to the newspaper. What is it, Jim, is about 28 days, 24 days, something like that?
Yeah, we have to get it a week ahead of time.
so would April 15th be too soon, or should we go to May? Or
I think
We can get it in, we can get it, actually, can we get April 7th?
possibly. We could
Possibly, but mostly,
do April
probably the
7th.
third week in April, we could get in if you wanted to accelerate it. Can I add one other thing too? Mr. Tuckfield did offer some suggestions. I thought they were good suggestions, and we're gonna pass those along to the attorney also to look at.
Okay, good. So are we setting a date, folks?
I just want to make sure that April wouldn't be too soon. Or you think we should move it back, or?
We went through this on a different site earlier today, and I believe that we still have time to get this scheduled for the 7th of April.
I was thinking the 15th, because I'm not going to be here, and who knows?
Is that the third week
Yeah,
The third week would be the 21st?
or first? And
I don't know.
yeah, the 7th and 21st are the meetings of the Planning Commission
Correct.
this month.
Yeah, so the first meeting, I won't be here. If we do it on the 7th, that'd be fine, but I just want to make sure we had enough time to do it.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we're going to go ahead and schedule it for the 7th or the 21st?
I think the 7th is, that's the soonest we can
7th
do
is
it.
good?
We
Okay.
prefer to get this in.
We want to get this done as soon as
There's
we
too
can.
many, we have many large developments coming in, and we're just trying to keep away from going to consents.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
If I could ask a question?
Sure, Mr.
Prior to this. You did mention I had a couple of questions. I think one of them was probably on the preamble to the ordinance, not the ordinance itself. I guess my only question would be if we set the public hearing, I think that the sample ordinance has to be published with that, is that correct? So the draft of it would have to be complete at the time that it was advertised?
The draft could be there, but you could make, after you heard from folks at the public hearing, you can make adjustments to that ordinance. I wouldn't suggest wholesale changes, but if you had a few adjustments.
Okay.
If you had some questions, I'll be happy to get it to the attorney and get that back to you.
I think the questions that I had sent it to you, which I can share with the board. I didn't,
Yeah, sure. I got a
trying to
copy of
avoid
them right here.
Open Meetings Act
I got-
things, I was trying to send them only to you, and I can let everybody else know. My concern would be to make sure that those would be able to be addressed and not held up because we had advertised something differently and then went to a public hearing. So as long as you feel,
I'm confident. I've seen this happen so many times where folks get in, then you hear from the public, and all of a sudden you want to make an adjustment before you send it on to the board. So I'm very comfortable.
Okay.
I just shy away from making a wholesale change, or taking out an entire section. or
no, I
something.
understood. And from what I understand this, I think this is relatively straightforward.
Yeah.
I did have two additional questions, if I could be humored. I know we're looking for a motion on this, but this is required if we want to accept a conditional rezoning. We can't accept one without this in place, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And generally speaking, one of the, as you said, but I want to underline it, one of the reasons to do this is to avoid some of these decisions happening in court without public input.
Absolutely.
Very good. All that said, Mr. Chairman, I have no problems with the public hearing, and I'm good with it. I just want to make sure those are resolved.
What were the other several comments? Just for our understanding and.
I have them here if you want me to
Yeah, you
pull
can
them
pass.
out.
I got them right here highlighted too. You wanna
So,
go-
on the, let's see, this is on the second page, under the "Do you need to attend any meetings" column, which is not part of the sample ordinance, but I did question it. The sentence says, "The Planning Commission Township Board may act on a request whether the applicant is in attendance or not, and action may be postponed if the applicant is not available for questions as determined." I just said, obviously it's not part of the ordinance, but I said, would this make us open to legal issues if we voted no when an applicant does not show up and we voted to not recommend? So just the way it was worded, it's not part of the ordinance, but I was curious. Then on the third page, under approval, which would be subsection 3, it says, the one sentence says, "which shall be incorporated by attachment as an inseparable part of the ordinance adopted by the township board." But it seems to be referring to the riders for the conditional rezoning, and I wasn't sure if I wasn't understanding the statement or if it needed to be reworded.
Okay.
And then the, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, yeah, what it is, when the conditional rezoning comes in, each and every conditional rezoning is a law upon itself, just like a planned unit
It's
development.
referred to
That's
as an
why
ordinance.
It's almost like a written agreement. They need to
I
have it
see.
in writing, so you.
So the ordinance being referred to is the conditional rezoning agreement
Yes.
and not the ordinance, the zoning ordinance.
It's not the zoning, it's a conditional
Correct.
rezoning
Okay.
ordinance.
Yeah.
is recorded.
And then the last one I had was on page 4, down near the bottom, 5C. says upon owner's written request, the township clerk shall record with Macomb County Register of Deeds and notice that the statement of conditions is no longer in effect. This is if it reverts back to its original zoning. My question was, why would we wait for the owner to request it? Why wouldn't we just send it,
That was a good comment.
send it? So,
Yeah.
and those were my three comments, questions on it. It seems like a pretty straightforward ordinance. It just says you can offer conditions and we'll listen to them and see if they make sense.
Got it.
So,
Yeah, the only thing about this ordinance, as I mentioned earlier, you just don't negotiate. Either you
Yes.
can say you just not enough screening, you just can't say do this or do that.
yeah, and I was happy, and I think I'd be curious to see how any paperwork for this would be worded to make sure that any conditions they had were really clearly stated, because I would think that at the point, if their conditions aren't clear, I know I would feel strange trying to understand the conditions, but not go over the line of saying I want something different. So as long as I had something really clear in front of me, then you can vote yes or no on it.
Once one comes in, we'll prime you for that. We'll find examples of other people adopted and get you a primer on that, and how motions are made and what they look like, what the agreements look like.
Yeah, and this is slightly off subject, but it's one of the things that I'd like to see at some point with the zoning board, is we're always asking what their practical difficulty is. And the way our application is written, we don't really encourage someone to tell us what their practical difficulty is. There's sort of a space for it, but usually we have to ask for it, and it ends up getting into a weird situation where we're almost trying to determine what they're asking for at the same time that they're asking it, so.
We can take a look at the application and see if anything needs to be updated.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman, I had some questions as well then. With this publication, will the preamble be submitted with the proposed zoning?
No, the zoning ordinance itself, the ordinance itself is what's submitted, not the upfront items. We can make an informational piece to make that available to
So people
counter.
understand
So
what
people
it
can
is?
understand, but it's not gonna be, it doesn't follow proper recording, because people will assume that's part of the law.
Okay, then I won't comment on anything there. As part of, excuse me. The only questions then that I have, I'll mention here under the first article, changes and amendments. Excuse me, under paragraph A. We have the sufficient legal and countable interest as an owner or a person. What is sufficient legal or countable interest? And I'm sorry, I'm ignorant of that.
No, that would be, I'll have the attorney double check this, but they would have some written statement that there's some proof that they are the owner of the property, or the other countable interest. Once in a while, if the owner has an attorney represent them, they put in writing, so-and-so is duly authorized to represent me and make decisions at a meeting. That would be the countable interest.
Okay. And then right after that, it said may be presented to the township board. Is that the way these are intended to be submitted, to the township board, and then they submit to us for recommendation? Or should we put in there township board and/or planning commission or planning department?
Item B you're looking at?
No, still under A, paragraph A.
Okay, let me go back.
Because later on, it does talk about it going back to the planning commission. If we're supposed to see it, then,
I believe what this is at the end is a township, what this is meant is the township board itself is the approving body. So at the end, before anything gets formal, they want to see that they've got who is responsible down on paper. And it's part of an agreement that they'll put forward.
okay. I thought it was describing how it's to be presented and who it gets to present
Yeah,
it to or issued to.
We will bring it to the planning commission. We will suggest they bring it forward all the way. But I think what this is pointing out is at the end of the day, before anything gets formal, the township board. I mean, you could put it as part of your conditions that, we don't know, and you could bring that up as part of the not negotiation, part of the discussion with them. Who's the owner here? Things like that.
Okay. Okay. B, as you mentioned, all amendment proposals not original or originating with the planning commission, and I guess I wasn't understanding that, and I modified it to say proposals not originally submitted to the planning department or commission shall be referred to. Again, because I thought it was coming to your planning department first, and then,
It will, but we're gonna leave the planning commission in there, because you're a recommending body, so we're not a recommending body, we're just kind of like the hammer in your toolbox type thing, so.
Okay.
What this is saying is sometimes people come and they wanna go straight to they might meet with Mr. Van Tifflin and I wanna go straight to the planning commission and start the process. And then we will start the process. Other times, folks can go, and the law allows, state law allows this. They can go to the township board or any elected official, and they can push it back to the commission. So there's two different methods someone can approach you.
okay. And then in C, and I understand that, then my comments, what I tried to do is identify, because it seemed like that was a progression that it was explaining. It says the planning commission shall study study the proposed ordinance amendment and make written recommendation addressing all legal and statutory requirements to the township board for approval. When I looked at the LSL Planning Incorporated recommendations and things, I tried to incorporate some of the things that they said should be done in there, and I had some additional comments, and maybe without being laborious on this, I could give you those comments as well.
What I would suggest, if you can give me the comments, I'll hand them off to the attorney, because the attorney's gonna take another look at this before we post it, and we can see how he feels.
Okay, okay. And there were a number of things, like even before the public hearing, it recommended that we get those statements or those conditions narrowed down, at least to the best of our ability, and it sounds like we're getting a public hearing before we've even probably seen what the resultant ordinance looks like.
It is possible they could make this, if someone did come in front of you, could make this, I'm trying to think of my term, I use consultation, but some type of preliminary presentation to the planning commission. You can write something in a process like that before you schedule a public hearing. That way, you get all the cards out on the table.
Right, and
Without
that's-
making any decisions at the point. Because I think the last thing the commission wants to do is try to get into all these details, and if the public's involved, it's like you want to get everything done ahead of time before it's an official
Exactly.
public.
And that's what they were suggesting as well, that there
Yeah.
would be some preliminary
We could put that in.
meeting, and hearing what you're going through too, to try and pull it out of somebody, for understanding. You just don't want to do that in a meeting, so I thought that was a great suggestion that they made. But I have a number of those, and I'll just give them to you.
Just give them to me, we'll record them, and then we'll type it into this document in the ordinance and ask the attorney to review these in light of the original ordinance and see what he says.
If I may, as an alternative, if you could send me a Word document,
Oh, sure.
I could put it in there as a remark, and you can strike it
I will.
or add it.
It saves me a little time.
Yeah.
I'd love to do that.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions? Mr. Bentley brought up a good point under purpose paragraph A. Should we not have the planning commission is, recommending to the township board for resolution? And if the planning commission is mentioned throughout, shouldn't in that paragraph, we just have just a little addition in there that says, we are recommending this to the board?
Because, some of these, I think, it's either gonna be a recommendation from the planning commission, you will be asked it some way, if it goes to bottom up or top down, you're gonna be asked to do a recommendation, so I think it's valid leaving that in there, gives you sets it straightforward that the planning commission will be the reviewing body.
Okay, all right. And then, as Mr. Bentley said, would we have enough time to review the ordinance if we have the public hearing on the 7th?
What the public hearing on the 7th is not to look at any site plans right now, it's simply to take whatever language we have,
To look at the ordinance?
and it's just to set the ordinance in place so you can start doing conditional rezoning.
But if some of the concerns that, that like Aaron has mentioned, or that I might have, or others that might see those changes and it might trigger something else, I'm just wondering if, to minimize the confusion.
I think in this, since we're just setting a process in place, I think it might behoove you then, if you're going to make comments, to hold a public hearing. You don't have to, it's not, just because you hold a public hearing that night doesn't mean you have to send a recommendation to the board that night. You could hold a public hearing, hear what folks have to say from the audience. You could look at your own comments, hear what the attorney has to say. And that's the purpose of the public hearing, is to gather comments. It doesn't say you have to make a decision that night. You can hold it off, and then at another meeting, subsequent meeting, then you can come in and formulate what you want.
Okay,
Sometimes it gets difficult if you have folks in a public hearing and you're trying to formulate final language.
that makes sense. So it's not final that night?
No. You
Look
just
at
want
it,
to hear
we
from the
listen to the
public.
public, and then we
Here's our draft
share our
ordinance.
thoughts, and then we go from there.
Yeah, here's our draft ordinance. What do you think? And then,
Okay, fair enough. Do we have a motion on this?
What was the date that we were looking for?
April 7th?
7th? So the motion would be to set a public hearing for April 7th for the purposes of reviewing the proposed conditional rezoning ordinance. Would that be
Perfect.
appropriate? Okay, so moved.
Motion by Mr. Tuckfield, seconded by
Second.
Mr. Bentley. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Is it possible that by our next meeting, we could at least have a rough draft of that, of the revised?
It's actually looking like right now that the next meeting is going to be canceled. We really don't have anything at this point that's going to be on that agenda, so our next meeting is probably going to be the April 7th meeting.
Is it, and I'm new here, so is it possible that we have a meeting, since we don't have a whole lot of agenda, that we can use it to discuss that and maybe some other issues?
If that's what the planning commission wants, it's fine. I just want to alert you guys that at this point, there's no
not.
other agenda item
I see.
that we have in the process.
Okay.
And without even having a meeting, you could email us the document anyways. Sure.
absolutely.
Whatever the planning
Absolutely.
commission
We'll
likes.
That
get
would,
out
that
to
would
you
be
guys.
great.
I was gonna suggest that.
Yeah. Okay. We good with A, everybody?
Yeah.
Okay. Old business B, proposed add-on, extension of time, special land use, Sunny's Pool, and more. Permanent parcel 0818326-002, located on the west side of Industrial Drive, approximately 443 feet, north of 23 Mile, Section 18, Kevin Zakariski, petitioner. Are you our petitioner? Okay. Then I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Shudo.
Yeah, I was gonna point out that the petitioner, we received an email, let me start first of all, you have a memo, one-page memo in front of you. We just produced this and handed it out this evening. And this is part of our discussion here. To be fair, we found the applicant emailed us this morning. We got back to him probably around 4:30 this afternoon, asking him to be here, so I'm not sure if you received that email.
Okay.
What had happened, if you go through our memo, is if you look at the italic version underneath it, that's a direct quote from his memo that we got. We just copied and pasted. If you recall, Sunny's Pools had that, just as background. I don't know if you want me to go back, if you guys remember what that was. He wanted that storage in the middle, but the fire department, the building department has concerns about firewalls and things. So on February 4th, the commission gave him approval, conditioned on all improvements be made within 60 days. We calculated that 60 days to be April 4th, which is 3 days before your next meeting. So if we can't make it by then he's, it expires and he has to start over again. So what we found out was you gave that approval February 4th. On February 24th, because the fire inspector assigned him was on vacation, he didn't meet with the fire inspector until February 24th to walk through and find out exactly what he had to do to bring that building up the fire code and building code in order to meet their requirements. The fire department gave him a list of items that needed, construction items that needed to be done. They found out what was needed. It requires an architect to do the drawings and a contractor to come and do it. It wasn't an easy fix, as originally thought. And so Mr. Zakarski emailed me today stating he's asking for more time so we can get the landlord is going to get an architect so he can get somebody on board and properly do this to meet the fire department and building department's requirements. So we hustled this out and just brought this up for discussion with this board, with your commission tonight to see if you even want to entertain an extension at this point or not. We're just bringing the information to you. We have no recommendation ourselves. See how you wanted to handle this and pursue.
Ask a question.
Absolutely.
Mr. Skirdo, how far along is he? Because I remember that when he was here, he seemed to think that it was a little easier than people had tried to tell him. And it sounded like he was going gangbusters for a minute, and then now I'm hearing that.
He was in there operating before. He's been operating for a while. He already had his merchandise and everything in place. And so the township was playing catch up a little bit with him. So that's why he thought it was an easy fix. And it turns out, well, he's got a little bit more construction as commissioners kind of advised him than he thought he had based on the fire department's comments.
Has he made a suggestion of how much time he needs?
No. Yeah, maybe.
Mr. Skirdo tried to get a hold of him this afternoon and was not successful. So being that the next planning commission meeting may get canceled, this was our last opportunity. If the planning commission is going to entertain an extension of time, this was our last opportunity. By the time we get to the 7th, it would have already expired, that 60 days that you had given to him originally.
So is there like a recommendation of 60 days? Is that what you're saying?
Well, my recommendation right now, if you gave him another 60 days and he couldn't meet that, at least he would have architectural drawings in front of him and we would have enough time to get him in front of this commission and explain why things are taking a while or what his time frame is at the time.
So don't say 90, keep him.
I would
At
keep him,
60?
myself, but yeah, I'd keep him another 60. At least you have a chance to get him personally in front of you to find out what's going on.
Comment I might have is if he gets an architect and they put something together in a week and submits it, how long does it take to get through our departments before he can really act on that?
He's like, Joe left already.
I mean, I won't say that. It seems like it would be more than 30 days. But unless there's a special avenue that he can take since he is in operation,
Yeah.
this needs to be expedited if he's going to operate the way he would like.
Mr.
I
Chairman,
guess the idea is to keep the fire,
Good.
keep him. Oh, sorry about that. So I guess the idea is to keep this thing moving. Don't let it get, don't let the, string get too far away from us.
Tight leash.
Tight leash, that was what I was looking for, the leash.
Mr. Tuckfield?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Skirdo, and Mr. Van Tifflin, what happens if this is not granted?
What was that?
What happens if it's not granted?
Then it becomes a code enforcement a legal matter, because at that point, if it's not granted, then he's not allowed to operate in the building, so it becomes a little bit on the messy side.
Because Here's my concern. I don't want to stand in the way of the business. I want to be helpful to the business. But it is a health and safety issue, and we're getting into pool season, and as much as the petitioner mentioned that he's got internet sales, the fire department doesn't say firewall for no reason.
What you could, another suggestion is if you don't want to go as far out as 60 days and 30 days isn't quite, from this date isn't quite, you could tell them you want to see him on the April 7th meeting, and we can send him up for the agenda, and we'll get something out to him saying you're required to be, if you want an extension, they're giving you till April 7th. That way he stays within, his approval doesn't expire, but yet you got him on the 7th to find out what actions he's taken at that point.
And I don't know what the stance of what our liability would be, but what happens if there's a fire and someone's injured and we've got this sitting in here for our second extension?
Uh-huh,
I mean,
that's true.
It's a concern.
It's not just liability. Obviously, I'm worried about the people here, but
Yeah,
there's a true issue
It's
here.
a concern of our departments too. It always was since day one. Since we brought him in, we got him in as fast as we could to try to get something done.
And as Mr. Bentley may have pointed out by not pointing it out, this wasn't a surprise to anybody who knows how to look at a drawing.
May I comment? Is there an alternative, if he is going to continue to operate, to store his materials, again, out on the site, maybe in containment, and it is bottles of liquid, and store it in agreement with the fire marshal's recommendations, so that it doesn't create the hazard that he's got to now put in a fire separation wall until such time is that is in place.
It's possible. It's a question I'd like to bring up to the fire marshal. I'm not experienced at that level to make any type of judgment on that thing. I'd rather have him look at it. You know, he's going to look at National Fire Protection Code, so.
Well, today is March 3rd. You said his 60 days is up April 4th.
April 4th.
So we're technically giving him 90 days to complete this. I mean, he still has 30 from the last 60.
If you want to,
So
yes.
why would we not just do a 30-day kind of thing that gives him 60 full days to make this happen?
And whatever the commission pleases, we're going to take it back to him, and
Okay.
that's the requirement.
Does the fire department still check in with him, or I mean, it's just that one time and then?
We can make the call and find out which inspector is out there, and you know what the follow-up procedures are.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't been in the place, so I don't know that I want to go in the place, but I haven't been in the place, so I don't know if there's more chemicals, there's more, you know, he's moved things around because of whatever construction he's done. I don't know. It just seems like it's something that should be watched.
Yeah, if the commission likes, I can try to get a report or try to get some feeling from the fire marshal that it was there, and then I could send that out to you to get a feel for what he tells us. If you want that, I can, we can push for that.
I would.
If you feel comfortable, that's not a big deal. I would just call the inspector and say, do you have any notes from your meeting and what has to be done, and we can share those with you. It's all public information.
Yeah, just send me an email.
And I'll send the whole, yeah.
Mr. Chairman, just my thoughts on this that I'd just like to put forward. I don't feel comfortable giving an extension past April. It's not 60 or 30 days, it's the time of the year that it is. April, I wouldn't expect we're gonna get a lot of people coming in for pool shock. May, on the other hand, you're starting to get into the season. I would think that if he comes back at that April meeting and things are in control and he's moving on, I mean, if the fire department's good with it, we can always give him another extension. To me, I don't want to vote for anything past the next meeting. I'm uncomfortable with the potential hazard that's out there, and I recognize there's other points to it, but
Should we move the extension of time till the April 1st meeting, till the 7th?
I think that'll be a 3-day extension or a 4-day.
Yeah,
extension.
this way he
Yes,
can
that's what it
present
is,
to
yeah.
us. If he has something, we can say yea or nay there instead of having it at the 4th and it expires. If he comes to us on the 7th and has a game plan, then we can look at it and say yea or nay.
Yeah.
If he doesn't, then we're back to square one. And then the fire marshal's recommendation should be what we go by.
So, Mr. Chair, what will we be doing? Just putting this off until the next meeting?
Yeah, I think we'll give him extension of
3 days?
3 days, 4 days, week, something simple.
You could set,
The
you could set the
April
meeting
8th.
date of the meeting.
Okay.
You can set the, you just want to set the date of the next meeting, that way if he comes in at that night, you guys can decide, you know,
And we'll
as a
put it on the
collective whole.
agenda.
And just on my part, I would, if we do that, I'd indicate to the petitioner that I wouldn't vote to extend it in a vacuum. If it's not done and he's not here and there's nothing here,
Yeah.
that's an easy decision for me.
Yep, me too.
Whatever the commission likes, we're gonna follow through with your direction.
Can we have somebody put that in the motion? Or do you
Oh,
have
Mr.
something?
Chairman, I have one more. For that meeting on the 7th,
Yeah.
would it be advisable for us, since this is becoming critical, and it involves both the building department and the fire department, to have a representative from each there so that as we get the status, and we set an extension, if we do, that we can talk about alternatives until that extension, until the completion is performed. And we get a buy-in from everybody that has to provide the approvals as well as the inspection that it has been completed. Because everybody wants it done, but there may not be the manpower or the ability to do it. I don't know. It would be my preference to have at least some representation or someone prepared to be able to address that, whether it's you having talked to them both and seeing what would be required and what they would be willing to do and what alternatives might be available.
Yes,
We can talk to him.
we'll talk to him, yes.
Okay.
And the petitioner also has 30 more days that we've given him already to get an architect out there and at least get the ball rolling.
Yes,
So, as
Absolutely.
Mr. Provenzano said, he looked like he was just running with it and then kind of stalled out a little bit. So we can go from there. So do we have a motion to just extend his time until April 7th? Anybody?
Mr. Chairman, I would make that motion to extend the special land use for Sunny's Pool approval to the April 7th meeting.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Tuckfield, supported by Mr. Shudo. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
But, pardon me? Oh, you said aye? All in favor? Opposed? Okay, all right. The motion passes. All right, now we're on item 8, which is public comments on non-agenda items. Sir, you're our public. Do you have anything you'd like to share? Come up to the podium.
No, if I could borrow one of you gentlemen for 5 minutes, I'm just trying to find out how this process is made. Resident in Macomb, we're at the Penzian Farm.
Sir, why don't you come up to the podium? This is the perfect time to come and talk.
No, we just
No,
need your
come on
name
up to the podium.
for public record.
Yep. State your name and address, please.
Jack DiGiovanni, 54839 Isle Royale Avenue. Where they're building that new subdivision, which you guys are talking about here, I'm just trying to find out how this process is made, who makes decisions, and how that happens.
What subdivision was that?
Over at 25 in Romeo Plank, we had a meeting maybe about a month ago, and people started standing up, and they were saying really ridiculous things about sidewalks and easements and fences. I'm not worried about that. I just want to know how this process is made and who makes the decisions. And so the builder comes to you. I just need a couple minutes of somebody's time to kind of explain to me how you guys make decisions and how this whole process works.
Mr. Skirdo and Mr. Van Tifflin, after the meeting, would you be
Thank you, guys.
available?
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks for coming out.
All right. Commissioners' comments. Anyone?
Mr. Van Tifflin, how's our planner coming? any progress?
Yeah, the offer that was extended to the potential department head has been accepted. He is going through all of the post-hire requirements. We're hoping to hear something back within the next few days to a week. And once that's done, and assuming everything went well, then we would establish a start date for the director.
Okay.
And in the meantime, I'd like to thank Mr. Van Tiffelen for everything he's done for us. He's held down the fort for us the last few months, and it wasn't for his leadership right now, I don't know where we'd be. So I just wanted to thank you for that, and kudos to you.
Yeah. Okay, anybody else?
Mr. Chairman, just two things I'd like to extend on that to Mr. Van Tiffelen and Mr. Skirdo. We've had an interesting couple of months. I know you guys have had a far more interesting couple of months than we have, so we appreciate your patience with us and helping us through all the things that you guys have been doing. I think we've been a little bit more intensive on emails than we have in the past, so we appreciate you rolling with us on that. I also wanted to congratulate Mr. Oliver. I'm not sure that he even knows yet, because I think he's on vacation. He's usually incommunicado, but I believe he was appointed as our board liaison, so it's good to have him back on the board. Look forward to working with him at least through the end of the year as he transitions to his new role.
Yep.
Michael, make sure he doesn't try to take your seat either. That's not his seat anymore, so.
We'll talk about that later. Okay, anybody else from the planning commissioners? Macomb Township Board of Trustee liaison is Mr. Oliver, and he is not here tonight. So, but we do have our ZBA liaison. Do you have anything you'd like to share?
Mr. Chairman,
Tuckfield?
I do not have much this evening. We do have our first meeting of the year coming up in another 2 weeks. We have a special meeting, I think. Actually, it's technically our second meeting of the year. The first one we had to abort for some other reasons. And along that line, we expect to do our election of officers at that point. We're going to do a review of our bylaws, which brings up something I want to mention actually in Commissioner's comments. I hope to work with the new planning director. There's some things that, as I mentioned to Mr. Skirdo earlier, that I'm hoping that we can work with ZBA. There's some clarifications on some of our applications that I think would help the township and the petitioners come to some better conclusions. That's all for that. If I could, just briefly, dip back, and that would be, I don't think we did this at the beginning of the year, primarily because not all of our members were here. We've got some change going over, but I'm hoping that when everybody's back and when we have a planning director in place, we can take a look through our bylaws. Again, we have been doing that on a yearly basis. Usually there's not much to do, but I think it's a good thing to try to do, and maybe the second meeting of April or the first meeting of May, we can take a look at those and run through them again.
Okay. Planning department items? I think we covered
Giving you the update on the planning director,
Right.
We are still pursuing the tablets that was a topic at the last couple of meetings. That is sitting with the supervisor's office right now, the estimates, and she's reviewing that with IT, making sure that we're getting what we need. So beyond that,
The only other
Go ahead.
thing we need is a hard copy of the master plan, if we
yes,
can get that.
yeah, I've made a note. I'm gonna have Becky get that ready starting tomorrow.
Look forward to start working on that.
Heard me?
So looking forward to starting working on that.
And our last item is, do we have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Mr. Tuckfield?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Bentley. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.